Today, we're going to talk about what makes a great email marketing or retention marketing strategist in e-commerce. This is something that I feel very qualified to talk about. In fact, I feel more qualified to talk about what makes a great strategist compared to pretty much any other facet of this game, whether it's building an agency, content marketing, sales. By trade, I was a direct response marketer, copywriter, as well as a CRM, retention, email marketing strategist, whatever you want to call it. And I've been doing this for 18 years, exclusively in e-commerce as well. I've also done B2B, I've done SaaS, but of those 18 years, the overwhelming majority of time was spent in e-commerce. So I've seen a lot of people do this job, both through my agency, working with brands as part of a partner, as our agency has done. I've worked in house for brands internally prior to getting into the agency. And obviously, I've hired a lot of people as well for Market Monster. And to be completely candid, it's been the hardest position to hire for. And it's the one that I've probably failed the most in trying to source and attract and even train the right candidates. It's very, very difficult to get a really good strategist. And before we get into the four qualities that do make a great strategist, it's important to know why there's such a huge void of great strategists to hire for agencies or brands. It's because the skills that it takes to become a great strategist typically lead to a path where these people go off to become independent consultants or they start their own companies. It is extremely difficult to get a really great strategist at the right price point, especially an agency who is able to do the job to the highest capability. And there's four particular qualities that I want to talk about today. Now, I'm not going to go over super obvious things like setting up flows, email deliverability. Everybody knows that's part and parcel of the job. I'm going to talk about some of the interpersonal traits that these people need, maybe overlooked, but that I specifically look out for during the hiring process that I've found over time. The best retention strategists have these in abundance. So let's get into what they are. The first one is you need someone with a mathematical and logical brain. They need to be somewhat removed from ego and they need to be grounded in data and not egocentric, personally emotional driven arguments. It's self explanatory, but it's actually one of the hardest things to vet people for because as a marketer of any kind, you need to constantly challenge the status quo and your assumptions. And you do this by being grounded in data and having a mathematical first principle type of thinking brain. So anytime I'm interviewing someone now and they are hyper emotional on the call, I usually find there is a good correlation to them not being quite a stoic, rational thinker. Now, these type of people actually, I'm not trying to write them off from being good fits for any type of company or strategy based role, but especially in e-commerce, I find these type of people can be somewhat they struggle to fulfill the role and do it correctly. And they get quite emotional, especially when dealing with brands, when things like their ideas don't get approved or they get challenged, etc. So you actually need someone who's quite neutral in terms of energy, not over exuberant all over the place, and quite stoic in their outlook on things, thinking from first principles, backed by data always, and detached from the ego as far as possible. High level of emotional intelligence, especially in this role, it's absolutely critical. And they need to leave these emotions at the door when they're coming into work, because as a strategist, especially in an agency, you're being pulled from pillar to post sometimes, and it's very easy to let your emotions get the better of you when someone tramples on your ideas, a promotion changes on a day-to-day basis, and you don't believe in the strategy sometimes that the brand is following, but you have to play politics. There's a lot of soft skills that are needed as well. And sometimes this is where the emotional, more personable people excel, whereas the logical, mathematical thinker struggles with this, dealing with the brand's politics. So it's very hard to find someone who is in that middle ground of being practical, logical thinker, good mathematics, good with things like statistics, unit economics, etc., but also having the soft skills to tame the beasts that you have to deal with when you're working with brands. especially in something as volatile and dynamic as e-commerce, where there's a lot of emotions involved. And that's sometimes where the second group of people who I sort of writ off before are really good. They can ride the ebbs and flows, the peaks of this game sometimes better than the people who've got the better skills to actually do the job. So how do you find someone who's got both? Well, I've been struggling with this since we began. We've sort of got like a 50% success rate in this position, to be honest with you. Whereas I would say we have upwards of 80% in other roles because it's quite obvious what you're looking for. Whereas the strategist position, it's very, very hard to find someone. So that's the basis of what I think makes a strong strategist. It's someone who is mathematically oriented. They are logical, thinking from first principles, and they're not too emotional. Doesn't necessarily mean they are best suited to working in an agency, but it definitely makes them the best fundamental principled strategists to work on a brand and drive the best outcomes. And funnily enough, the best strategists that we've ever worked with, I've recruited them quite junior and trained them from the ground up. And I think this goes into the introduction where I was saying that it's very, very hard to find seasoned people at a good price point you can mold into your team and your system. Most of the time, the best people that I've worked with have been people that we've invested a huge amount of effort and energy into, upskilling them, training them to the level and the methodology that we believe in fact, there's some amazing people I've been able to train and they've went on to earn a lot of money and they're doing really well now, which makes me very happy. The second one is critical. Second point, you need to be organized, especially if you're working in an agency context or even e-commerce in general. There is a lot of moving pieces. You need to be fast paced, you need to be diligent, and you need to be meticulously organized. I hate working with people who are just all over the place. And honestly, I'm one of these people as well. So I have to be super conscious of my bad traits coming through to this role because you can't organize from chaos. You just can't. You have to have solid organization, and that needs to be the baseline for what your strategy is built upon. So you need to be good with using project management tools, organizing basic things into files and folders with the right taxonomy. Sounds like simple things, but it's actually so important as you start to scale up and manage to stay organized. Otherwise, you just end up in a world of chaos where you're going in a strange trajectory where there's no direction to your work. You're not being precise and you're losing things, you're dropping the ball. So you have to get someone who's organized. And can you train organization? I don't think you really can. I think it's a personality trait, especially by the time you become an adult. And again, it's very, very hard to vet someone for this at the interview stage. You just don't know if they're going to be active on a project management tool, whether they're going to be responsive, whether they're going to use taxonomy and naming conventions, etc., and organize things and follow processes. Sometimes you just learn this about people on the job when they start. So again, it's quite difficult to vet someone for this at the point of interview because they all say they're organized. Nobody turns up to an interview and says, yeah, I write things on scraps of paper and I don't use ClickUp. Everybody says the right things, obviously, to get the job. But just look out for that. If someone's dropping the ball on it quite quickly, quite early on, and they're resorting to, Slack pings like me, then it's a red flag and you need to be aware of that. And in the beginning, if you do hire someone and you notice this becomes a pattern of behavior, stomp it out as soon as possible. You have to. Third quality you need in abundance, especially if you're on the agency side, you need to be assertive. This is so important to get the respect from clients and not be trampled all over, and also not make the clients bring you into their world of chaos. If you lack assertiveness in this type of role, then clients not going to respect you. They're going to bring you into their world of chaos, and they're also going to blame you as well for their disorganization. I've seen it happen time and time again. Really nice people that we've employed thinking they're being so friendly, so polite to clients, and then the client ends up dissatisfied and they churn. Why? Because we allowed them to dictate the chaos on the account, and you need to nip that in the bud. Of course, it's not always possible because you're dealing with someone who has the personality trait of being disorganized. But if you allow them to behave that way and continue behaving that way, then that's going to have negative implications down the production line on your team as well. Because if you're reactive and you're not assertive, and you're just being passive to all the instructions from the client, and you're not putting your ideas, your processes, your rules and boundaries in place, then that chaos is just going to filter through from you to the rest of your team, and you're going to resent that client. So being assertive, setting strong boundaries, making sure that your ideas are acknowledged, and they should be if you are possessing those first group of qualities that I talked about of being logical, first principle based thinker, good mathematical background, you're going to get the respect of your clients, but you must be assertive with your ideas and your management style. If you don't, it's a recipe for disaster. Fourth and final quality a good strategist needs to have, they just need to have a childlike curiosity about the world and their job, most importantly for you. This means embracing new technological developments, not being so, what's the word? So defensive, so stubborn about the way things are done, because we are living through an age, an era where technology is just progressing at breakneck speeds and things can always be better. So you want someone with an appetite to constantly learn. And I've seen it again. We've had some good logical thinkers, even who are managing accounts really well. They keep things ticking along, but the client leaves because there's no excitement. So that's where you need someone who maybe is slightly emotional and they're bringing those new ideas to the table. They're excited. They have that high energy output. And you need to constantly innovate as well. Every 3 months, every quarter, you need to have an initiative for someone managing an account in your agency or brand sides to bring a new idea, a new initiative forward, like an OKR. That's going to mitigate churn. It's going to lock people in for long-term projects. And frankly, you should be doing that anyway because you should be experimenting, trying to get incremental returns. So you need that constant curiosity to challenge the status quo, experiment with new ideas, new strategies, new technology. And that is the basis for how you're going to develop as a strategist as well. So just to recap the four things: mathematical brain, logical thinking, you've got to be organized, you've got to be assertive, and you need to maintain curiosity. Those four qualities are critical to making you a world-class strategy. If you have someone on the team or you're interviewing someone and they don't have these qualities, move on. It's not going to work out. It is very hard to find someone with all of them, but it is possible. A lot of the time, though, they might be quite junior and you need to polish them up to get them to this level, but they are out there. They're just very, very hard to find.